Okay, today is Monday, right? Today's Monday the 26th, and we've been doing a few videos on the weather up here in New England, and we got a lot of snow. Made a fire out there just to show, you can get fire in adverse conditions. I used a fire steel ferro rod. Okay. Somebody'd say, well, why don't you just use a lighter? Well, windy conditions, you're not always going to be able to use a lighter. Sometimes lighters don't always work anyway. They malfunction too. What about a match? Well, the thing is, this just demonstration that you can get fire in an adverse condition. And you guys need to go out and practice in the conditions when they present themselves. So when a really terrible snowstorm comes through, okay, might even be worse than the one that we just went through here. I mean, it's gotten very, very cold in New England before, and I did a fire starting siege stove video a few years ago, and it was very cold and it was very windy, and I had a difficult time in that particular scenario, but I got it started. But the thing is, guys, is perseverance. You just got to persevere, and you'll get the fire started. Just think it through. Try to work everything to your best advantage, and just keep at it. Perseverance is a big deal. So there's supposed to be some flurries again today, but of course it's not a storm, right? A few flakes. Right? Well, let's just dust a few more flakes of snow on them. But so yeah, right now it's only like 18 degrees Fahrenheit out there, which is fairly warm in my opinion. But the thing is that the snow just keeps piling up, and get over here, do the old lean the wooden chair trick. So here's my stick, my measuring stick, and this is 36 inches, which in America, United States, is that's 1 yard. It's very close to a meter. So put this down in there till I hit pay dirt, and a relatively open area, right, so that there's nothing obstructing the snow from actually accumulating. Now they say that in our area we got about 24 to 26 inches of snow in the surrounding area, but this one place where I've been checking snow accumulation on my property here got to 18 inches. Okay, 18. Right. So that's right there. So that's still pretty deep, and then of course it drifts, around the property. But it could actually be deeper than that, but it's not like I'm just gonna go taking a stroll around the property, you know, because it could be deeper here and it could be deeper there and it could be shallower here and shallower there, right? But just to give you an example, these are my mucklucks that I was wearing in the first video yesterday, and these are 20 inches tall. 20. So 20, 20, right? So I was post-holing a bit last night when I went to take my final measurement for the evening. I took my yardstick. I got my snowshoes, and I didn't wear these mucklucks. I wore my trappers from Baffin made trapper boots, because I already have those those snowshoes, and those trappers are already set up to marry quickly. I got the straps set on them, and so I put the trappers on, tightened up the tops on them, and you know, because the thing is, I'm wearing snowshoes with them anyway. I'm not gonna sink that much. I sank a few inches, you know, but then there was a whole bunch of snow underneath me, you know, supporting me. But I went out there and you know, got the measurement, came back in, and took the snowshoes off, went to the back porch area, and knocked off a bunch of snow from the back porch. And the back steps, I got all the snow off of my back steps, and kind of in preparation, you know, for today. So, yeah. So the snow on my truck hood is really high. It's really high. Now, if you're going out to like warm up your vehicle after a snowstorm, leave the snow on the hood until you get it warmed up, and that will help warm it up because it'll contain the heat being generated by the engine warming up. Okay, it's kind of like putting a blanket on your hood of your vehicle. So yeah. Then of course I went out in various types of clothing yesterday. I wore the Miklegard wool anorak. Talked a bit about that in the first video, and some of my other clothing, and then you know, the second video and third video, I wore a double jumper, a double sweater setup that I put together. The outer sweater jumper is Miltech. It's a German made sweater, and it's a direct copy of the Austrian Army wool sweater, which I have one of those also. It's actually 1 or 2 sizes smaller than the one I was wearing yesterday. So that one I could just wear it on its own, you know. If I put another wool sweater under that one, it'd be a little bit, you know, uncomfortable because it'd be a bit tight. More in the neck, you know. But, anyway, that's set aside. That's an original. This one yesterday, after I got it, I lanolized it, 100% sheep's lanolin. Lanolized the whole thing. It just soaks right in. So not only does lanolin recondition your wool to make it softer, hydrophobic, which is very water resistant. Lanolin is also fireproof. So those are three really good qualities. So if you want to re-lanolize, you know, I suggest it. Just use some light heat from a hairdryer, help it, you know, soak right back in, and good to go. So on the inside of that one, so that's a heavyweight. That's a heavyweight wool sweater. It's very heavy. And then on the inside of that one, I have a Barber brand Scottish heavyweight wool sweater. But that one's got a Guernsey neck. The Miltech one has a turtleneck that comes way up, and I think it's got like seven buttons or so. Which after I bought that and got it, I went through with heavy duty thread and sewed those buttons again on top of the original, so that those will never come apart, you know, even in adverse conditions. So short of tearing the whole thing out to get the button off, right? So that's that sweater. I wore that yesterday because one of my subscribers sent me an email, said, "Hey, what do you think about this sweater?" You know, and I was like, "Oh, that's more or less a copy of the one I've got." I think it lacked a couple of buttons in the turtleneck area, but it looked just the same. But they also carried a direct copy of the Austrian Army wool sweater as well on their website. But the thing is that actually, well, I had ordered some wool stuff from that website, and you know, I showed the guy that owns the company. He's in America. I showed him some stuff from this YouTube channel, and then he sent me an email. He says, "Hey, I would like to send you some products to evaluate or whatever." And you know, I said, "Oh, well, great. You know, I'll do that." But you know, just gonna be honest with you that I'm gonna tell you what I think in an honest manner. You know, I'm not gonna like say it's something it's not or anything like that. You know, then I never heard from the guy. So the ones that don't want you to give honest feedback, probably not gonna hear from them again. I gave honest feedback on my Mick Lagarde Hunter or Hunting Anorak, whatever they want to call it. It has a deep hood. I like it a lot. But you know, there's a couple of things, and I mentioned them on video, and those things were that that it needs a fur ruff on that hood in order to be 100% effective for what it's intended for the tundra, the boreal regions, and so on. It really needs a fur ruff, you know, and I recommend Wolverine. That's just what I recommend. You could do sheep's fur, sheep's wool. You know, you could use that. You could use, well, you could use Arctic fox. Okay, Arctic fox is very good for that as well. Somebody will say, well, why not reindeer fur? you know, because reindeer is in the top. It's in the top 4 of the warmest furs because of its hollow fibers. And then you got polar bear is the very warmest of all mammals. Polar bear fur is the one that will keep you the best insulated, the warmest. But you know, that's a very, very controlled thing. So it's not like you could just say, "Hey, I need some polar bear fur for my anorak," you know. You gotta be careful things like that. Then reindeer. Reindeer is almost but not quite in the same category as polar bear. But the problem is that reindeer hairs break. They're brittle. You know, they break. So you could have it for a while and it could be great, and then when the hairs start breaking and stuff, they just start losing more and more insulating value. And then you got Arctic fox. You know, that's also extremely warm. Now then, believe it or not, then you got to go all the way around to the other side of the earth to New Zealand. New Zealand, they've got their version of a possum, right? A possum in New Zealand is not the same as a possum in the United States, but the bushy-tailed possum in New Zealand is known for its insulating value when it comes to fur. Now they have an overabundance of bushy-tailed possum over there in New Zealand, so you know, you can make all the hats and stuff you want out of it, and you're not going to hurt the population. Okay. Now, so those are the top 4 insulators in the animal kingdom. Notice Wolverine isn't in the top 4, but the thing is, Wolverine has, you know, it's got the colors, it's got the toughness, and you know, so forth, right? So that's a good one for a fur ruff. The fur ruff, you're just providing yourself clarity, no ice buildup. You know, when you're breathing, creates a little microclimate up in here. You know, between your breath and the outside air. You know, there's this little thing going on here. And the larger the rain, not the rainbow, but the starburst or sunburst is what you call it when you got all this hair going off in every direction, right? The larger that is, the better. The larger that is, the better. So, but you don't need to go crazy with it. You know, you don't need a tiny little fur ruff, but you need a nice one. You know, a couple of inches of fur all around, and you're good. Of course, the second thing I talked about was with the Miklegard anorak was it's an expensive anorak. Some people may say it's not expensive, but I believe it to be, you know, somewhat expensive. It does not have a fur ruff, and the hood is lined. The hood is lined, okay, which could facilitate you moving wool caps or hats or whatever you want to call it, toque. Okay, you know, facilitate that moving around in there easier without binding on the hood itself. Okay, it also provides a layer, a barrier to help prevent heat because it is quilted lined. It's a quilt lining, but I'm not sure what they use for the quilting. If it's wool, that would be great. You can get wool batting and quilt stuff, okay? if they did a lining for the rest, if they did a lining for the rest of the anorak, that would be perfect, because then it'd make it easier to get on over wool under layers. Okay, wool under layers. Old school coats, wool coats from 50 and 100 years ago used to have silk linings. They had silk on the inside. You look at an old Pendleton, um, yeah, you look at an old Pendleton an old or something of equivalency, and a lot of times you will see a silk lining. Right. So yeah, those are very, very important suggestions for Mick Lagarde on those. On the anorak. Um, anyway, also one other thing. You know, obviously my anorak was working fine for me, but the area where the head and the neck come to the body, you know, I had a wool mid layer on a sweater, rich wool sweater, and then I had a weather wool neck gaiter that went from my neck down and into the sweater. Of course, it bunched up a little bit, but you know, that was comfortable. But if there were just a little bit more room there in the build of the garment, then it would have been maybe a little bit more comfortable. You know, but you know, then you're starting to really like get picky. You know. And can't really think of much else for that. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm gonna have to get the snow blower out today, so be doing that in a bit. Drink my coffee and stuff, and then I'll go ahead and start make a little path to the cellar, and then power up the snow blower, get that out, drive that out. Right, I just back it up a ramp out of the cellar, and then yeah, so it does a really good job. I highly suggest them. Well, that's about it for now. You guys got any emails? Drop them to me. Okay? Alright. We'll see you soon.